Good morning, brothers and sisters. Good morning, friends. Happy Sabbath. I'm so happy to be back here today. Yesterday, we have discussed the art of letting go, part one, and focus on the key word, Rapha, the true meaning of be still. Today, we will be discussing about chaos, the context of Psalm 46:10, which is found in the first three verses of Psalm 46. I know chaos is part of life. Let me read once again the verses found in Psalm 46, 1 to 3. God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. Now, as I have told you yesterday, this is a picture of a shaken world. This is a picture of maybe of your family when your family is split into half, of your marriage that didn't work and fail, of your neighbors that end up hating you or you hating them because of some disputes or conflict. Brothers and sisters, sometimes we feel that our world is shaken, that the ground that we count on, that we depend on, is all of a sudden disappear. Yes, we call this chaos. Biophysically, sometimes we discover that our life is no longer the same. We feel chaos. But the question is, why or how in this world does God allow such pain and suffering? What is exactly the meaning of me experiencing all of this kind of pains that I'm experiencing through my relationship with others, through my relationship with my spouse and my children, and even my relationship with myself? Brothers and sisters, there is a reason why chaos is part of our healing process. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. We all know that in verse 2 of Genesis 1, that the earth is void and is a perfect picture of chaos. But out of that chaos came something beautiful. Now, Scott Peck, a famous author, and maybe some of you know that he wrote one of the popular books that he wrote is The Road Less Traveled. But he also has this book called A Different Drum. In that book, he described a process where how a community is fully experienced to its authentic state. How can you experience the birthing of a loving, pure, real, genuine relationship in a community? He says that it takes several stages or process before one could finally achieve and attain this loving relationship, the genuine, the accepting, and the gracious, and the non-judgmental form of community. But he says it starts with something on the surface, and he calls it pseudo community. A pseudo community is when people gather together and trying to achieve a common goal. Maybe the ideas of loving one another, the ideas of valuing each other, respecting one another, just like what we have in our church. We have a common goal. We have a common teaching, the teachings of Jesus Christ, that we have to love one another. And yet at the same time, because of these values, we would like to be respectful and loving on the surface. We don't actually share what is happening within us. We don't actually tell our friends in the church, even the person sitting right next to us, that our marriage is in shambles, that my mother is dying of cancer, or my son has left me several months ago and never heard of him until today. We don't usually share something personal that would somehow characterize our community as genuine or authentic, supporting one another. Sometimes even in prayer circles, we say our prayers, and say, hey, please pray for me. I'm struggling. And to some people's ears, they would take that more of as an information or a news, as opposed to something that would touch their heart and say, oh man, this person has been suffering just like I am, and I never really realized that we are in the same boat. Friends, Scott Peck says, the first step of a birthing a community is to admitting the fact that there is a pseudo-ness in our relationship. There is shallowness. There is falseness in our relationship. And we're trying to be polite, hoping that eventually down the road, we can truly count on each other. We can truly trust each other. We can truly be open with one another. But on the surface, as the first step in achieving this genuine community, we have to survive, engage, and feel everybody on the shallow part of this chapter. Now, in the screen here, this is the natural process of achieving a new community. Started with a pseudo, and then we experience chaos, and then maybe emptiness, for us to be able to fully appreciate the newness and the genuineness and the authenticity of a community. Scott explained this using a very popular image as far as I'm concerned. He uses the tropical islands. The Philippines is composed of tropical islands where we experience typhoons, maybe 10, 20 typhoons and even more, year after year after year. Now, it's nothing new to us that we experience this shaking. As Psalm 46, 1-3, the waters foam, the water raise, sometimes the mountain collapse, the landslides here and there. These are familiar scenes in the Philippines. And Scott Peck says, but these tropical islands, there is something in them that is not quite visible or experienced in many American suburbs. What is that? The genuine form of community. Why? Not only because of culture, and maybe culture plays significantly, but also because of the kind of chaos that these tropical islands were experiencing year in, year out. Typhoons and earthquake, for example. I remember one day when in the Philippines, I think you have heard Mount Pinatubo. Okay, as usual, we went to church. It was Saturday. We attended the service, and after the service, my mom drove the car back. I was in the car, and we were singing Sabbath songs, looking forward to a wonderful lunch back home. But when all of a sudden, it's noontime, but all of a sudden it became so dark. This is an actual experience of Psalm 46, 1, 2, and 3. When the mountain shakes, and all of a sudden we feel the earthquake, that our car was swaying, as we drive the highway. And all of a sudden, because we can no longer see, we stop. And it's not just us. All cars surrounding us, we all stop. And then, the reason why we couldn't see, it's not just because of the darkness. It's because our windshield all of a sudden is full of sand and ashes. Our wipers are trying to clean our windshield, but it was having a hard time because it's becoming heavier and heavier. To make the long story short, we managed to go home. And when we got home, it was totally dark. Not because it was nighttime, but because the clouds and the heavens, because of the ashes coming from Mount Pinatubo, everything has been covered. The atmosphere is dark. And not only that, powers, the electricity is gone. Black out the whole town and maybe the whole province. So what did we do is we start, of course, to find our corners and maybe say a little prayer. It is chaotic. But friends, we can't just stay in a corner and pray. We start feeling our pillars in our houses, they start to make noise. They're cracking and squeaking. Why? Because our roof is accumulating tons of sand, coming from the volcano keep on spitting sand and ashes and covering our houses with this nonstop rain of sand and ashes. So what do we have to do? Is that we have to go to our roof and shovel and clean our roof and push all the sand to the side of the house so that the house would remain still and would remain intact. Otherwise, it will collapse. We have done this the whole night just to make sure no sand is accumulated on our roof. As we were trying our best to clean our roof, we were surprised that the following day, when the sun starts to rise, I've seen my friends and some acquaintances and some people I don't even know their names. They are exactly doing the same thing on their roof. We finally see and say hi with each other with a big smile and see the amount of work that we still have to do. And all of a sudden, we see ourselves helping one another as if there is a deeper relationship that's been existing for years, especially the mothers whose husband maybe have gone or maybe they're widowed. I don't even know some of our neighbors in the area. But because of this calamity, because of this chaos, a natural birth of a genuine community took place. We are helping one another, giving food towards each other. The kids are all of a sudden running back and forth the roof and down the kitchen to make sure we have water, we have supplies. And these are not our kids. These are kids from different houses. And the mothers and the fathers and the sisters and the brothers, we are all together trying to clean up, helping one another. It's such a beautiful sense of communion, sense of community. And partly because of the chaos that we are experiencing. This is what Scott Peck was saying. For us to achieve a new relationship, a new beginning, we have to go through the process. This is my own sense of understanding the birthing and the beginning of a genuine community as a product of this whole process of pseudo, chaos, and emptiness. Now, I haven't talked about emptiness, but even when the volcano stopped spewing ashes and sands and dry rocks and lava close in the vicinity, even when it stopped doing that, and you can feel the stillness of the air, you can smell the stench of the ashes, and you can maybe feel the sadness of those people who lost their loved ones. The more we stay in that empty feeling of losing people and losing properties and losing everything, the more we get closer with one another, the more we become equal. There is no more rich or poor. There is no more high-ranking society people and low excluded people. We are all one in our own emptiness. This is part of the process of the new beginning, process of an experiencing a genuine community. Brothers and sisters, I just want to let you know that chaos is quite important process of our spiritual growth. I'm not talking about chaos as a process to achieve something better. It's not a payment. It's not a down payment for our future sense of security. I'd like to present chaos in the context of birthing. There are major physicians who believe that a person who has gone through the birth canal, that's the normal birthing process from womb out, to the life and space in this world. These babies, they are more resilient and and have better immunity if the natural birthing process is experienced by each of these babies. But those who are born out of C-section, I'm born out of cesareans. My mother was a C-section, was cesarean when I was born because of some complication. But I was told that, based on some of the physicians who believe that the birth, the natural birth would give you a better immunity and make you more resilient. Maybe that's true. Growing up, I have this heart problem, and I don't know. They said it's congenital, and I'm glad that it's now addressed. But maybe it's true. Maybe that process of pain and chaos involved in the natural birth would make someone much more stronger. It's just part of the natural design that we all experience after the fall, right? We have to go certain pain and chaotic process. It's not because to punish us, but God, for a very strange reason, understand the benefit involves in going through such a process. In Psalm 23, the shepherd says, David says, yet though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. That is a picture that tells me that the flock has to go through that. If they want to be stronger and if they want to survive in the wilderness, the shepherd has to take them through that valley of the shadow of death. It's part of their growth. It's part of building their immunity. It's part of building their resilience. And brothers and sisters, this is a spiritual practice that I want us all to appreciate in this series. Let me tell you about a tale of two rabbis. In John 3, a rabbi visited another rabbi, Nicodemus, not only a rabbi, but a member of the Sanhedrin, leaders of the church. Nicodemus heard the wonderful things that Jesus has done, and he was convinced that in his own mathematical computation and his own ethical equation, if you are accomplishing a lot of things, the more you can prove that you are coming from God. If you are an accomplished individual, education-wise, business-wise, leadership-wise, financial-wise, if everything is falling into the right place, then that means you have the evidence to share to the world that you are God's chosen individual, that you are a blessed one, that you're the anointed one. And he saw Jesus with a little bit confusion. Jesus, who has no educational degree, formal degree. Jesus, who's been traveling from one place to another, almost homeless. And Jesus, who has no position inside the church, and yet loved by the people. And yet people are gravitated to him because of his compassion, and not only that, his ability to make miracles, his power to make the lame walk, his power to raise people from the dead. Even to make the blind see and the mute speak and hear. And Nicodemus was so impressed. And therefore he says, good master, good teacher. He knows that this would somehow compensate with everything that Jesus might lack. He's still good because of the things that he has accomplished. So he came to Jesus and convicted in his heart, maybe Jesus has something that he doesn't have. Both of them are rabbis. Both of them have followers. But one's estimation of growth is based on one's success and achievement. But Jesus all of a sudden sensed the difference of Rabbi Nicodemus and Rabbi Jesus. Jesus says, why are you calling me good? There's only one that's good, God. Now Jesus was trying to open Nicodemus' eyes that his philosophy is not matching the spiritual path towards experiencing freedom and growth. It is not about what you achieve in this world. Jesus was saying it is about taking a path towards new beginning. Therefore, Jesus confronted Nicodemus and says, unless you experience a new birth, you will not enter the kingdom of heaven. Brothers and sisters, this is a mind-blowing challenge and experience for Nicodemus. And he said, how can this be? How can this be? How can these things be? Do you want me to go back to my mom's womb and experience the birthing process again? Jesus almost, maybe in my own estimation, maybe Jesus was tempted to say, yeah, because your first birthing process is not complete. Maybe you had a spiritual C-section where you were spared to experience the suffering. You are a rich person. You are anchored. You are secured. But I don't know if you have the spiritual resilience to fully understand who God is. But Jesus didn't say, yes, you have to go back to your mom's womb. Jesus says, but you still have to be born again. You are born of the flesh. But you need to be born of the Spirit. If Jesus could just tell Nicodemus that all people in Jesus' time were thinking that a new beginning is maybe a new government, a new beginning is maybe finding a superhero in Jesus, a new beginning maybe is when Jesus could finally overthrow the Roman emperor and even maybe the governor assigned in Judea. One day, here is the pseudoness of the community, leaving out their fantasy that Jesus is their superhero, that Jesus is the very commander-in-chief that could finally overthrow the Roman soldiers and the Roman Empire. They were singing Hosanna at the triumphal entry. Remember when Jesus was riding on a donkey and Jesus was entering the gate and people was hailing him as their king and throwing their robes on the ground and so that Jesus could walk as if it's a sacred space. And people were so delighted. People were so committed to the idea that this is our superhero. Let's praise him and let's worship him. Do you know that according to the gospel, only a few days later, Jesus was walking this time alone and the cross on his shoulder, experiencing the beatings and the mocking of the multitude. What happened? But this is the part of the chaos. If Jesus could only tell Nicodemus that you might be part of those who are singing Hosanna, but the birthing process, the spiritual birth, requires Via Dolorosa, the road to suffering. We know that Jesus experienced chaos and then emptiness when he was in the tomb before he finally experienced a new beginning that he has promised to each one of us. That's a big part of the chaos that we have to go through. Letting go, Rapha, or being still in Psalm 46 verse 10, it's very hard. It's not just, okay, finally I have this confidence and I can jump and, I know God will save. No, because we don't know. We don't know how. The certainty it's not unfolded before our eyes. We still have to trust and to see through our eyes of faith, not through our literal eyes. It is hard. When Jesus was on the cross, Jesus was experiencing such darkness as what I have shared last night. But in the conversation of Nicodemus and Jesus, brothers and sisters, Jesus brought Nicodemus back to the very painful and traumatic event that the Israelites were experiencing in the wilderness. Jesus told the story of Moses to Nicodemus. He said, remember when the people were dying because of snake bites? If you see your child, you see your husband, you see your spouse, and maybe you're so scared that maybe the snake is now running after you, you're the next victim. You remember that in the wilderness? All people are suffering. They are dying of snake bites. And then people are saying, Moses, help us. Yeah, if we have done something wrong against God, now we repent, but please help us. This is terrible. This is frightening. This is scary. And Moses prayed to God, and God said, Moses, here's what I want you to do. I want you to make a bronze snake, and put it on a pole, and lift up that pole. Imagine, friends, if you are experiencing trauma in life, modern science says if you're experiencing trauma, the best way to heal your trauma is to confront the little traumas that you have experienced until you finally confront the whole trauma. If you're afraid of spiders, maybe it's helpful if you slowly confront your fear of spider. If you were abused as a child, you just can't bury that under the rug and live as if nothing happened. You have to go back and maybe process and maybe recall and identify and say and experience and say ouch for every pain that you have experienced. Maybe you were silenced not to even say ouch when you're experiencing those trauma. This modern science maybe have found something, it has found something that's very helpful to trauma patients nowadays. But let me tell you, the scripture knows the meaning of facing one's trauma, the healing that it involves in facing one's trauma. When God asked Moses to put the serpent on a pole so that people can see exactly and face their trauma, it is the beginning of healing. Medical science adapted the serpent on this pole and make it their symbol. It is actually a spiritual experience. It's not a biophysical experience. That symbol is a spiritual experience. When God is inviting us to face and confront our own chaos in life. Why? Because when God invites us to see our own chaos in life, He is not presenting to us a chaos in a vacuum. That serpent on the pole, Jesus reminded Nicodemus, you remember that serpent on the pole that Moses has lifted up? Nicodemus says, let me share with you the verse here. Verse 14 of John 3. And as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, so must the Son of Man be lifted up, Brothers and sisters, Jesus was reminding Nicodemus, he was reminding you that the very thing that you identify as a symbol of shame, a symbol of condemnation, a symbol of pain and suffering, is also the symbol of healing. How did that happen? It would never be like that unless Christ took this pain and suffering, unless Christ carried this cross, unless Christ gave his life in Calvary. It is that very reason why Jesus is comfortable, is confident in inviting people to see the very trauma that has condemned them, the very trauma that has hurt them, because that pole is not operating in a vacuum. That pole is not only symbolizing trauma, it's also symbolizing hope. But hope could not happen unless trauma exists. Not to inflict trauma in you, my friend, not to inflict more trauma in me, but to remind us that God has gone. God has been there before us. God has experienced the hellish experience that we are experiencing right now so that he could provide companionship. And sometimes we're not looking for companionship. Sometimes our mind is just looking for escape, looking for numbness, looking for a way out. But Jesus was saying, even though you walk in the valley of the shadow of death, fear not, for I am with you. Brothers and sisters, Jesus has called us to face our own chaos, to carry our own cross. That's how we follow him. You know, sometimes we are big in our evangelism to teach beautiful things in our doctrines. Sabbath, second coming, spirit of prophecy, sanctuary, and many, many other things. And then we are seeing people, and sometimes it causes us even to shed tears of joy when they accept Jesus as a personal Savior and get baptized. And then they end up being members of this church. But Jesus is not looking for members of the church, brothers and sisters. Membership is not the goal of evangelism. I'm not even quite sure if evangelism was in Jesus' mind. Jesus was looking for followers, not members. But the sad thing is this: Jesus is not looking for followers so that you would have escape, you would have numbness or pain-free kind of life. When Jesus was looking for followers, he says, follow me, but here's the thing: you have to carry your cross. You have to carry your cross, then follow me. Why? What does that mean? Friends, we cannot just stare and see the cross as a symbol of hope. When we see the cross, we see the serpent on that cross. And that serpent is the story of our act of falling. It is a realization that we have a dilemma. We are dying not simply because the serpent has bitten us. We are dying because as a result of a freedom of choice, the choice that Adam and Eve had exercised at one point. If their choice is to choose self, I'm not saying I'm better than Adam and Eve, and I cannot blame them for choosing self as opposed to choosing God at a crucial time of their life. That is just a message that we are on the same boat. That is my choice. As in many ways, I have chosen self before God. Looking at this serpent is reminding me that even that choice, I was helpless. I exercised my freedom to choose me, to choose self, not to actually free myself, but to burden myself. But because of that choice, there's consequence. I know that the consequence could still felt by me. I feel that consequence. The impact of death and suffering. I feel that. You know, right now we're just remembering our mother-in-law. She just passed away. Consequences is there. But this consequence is not happening and being experienced by me alone or by you alone. There is something deeper that Jesus reached as far as consequence is concerned. The death that he experienced and the emptiness that he experienced in the tomb is for us to experience a new beginning, a genuine community between self and Christ. When Jesus was saying you have to lose life so that you can find life, Jesus was not actually saying condemn self forever. But there is a peace in self that we have to let go. This desire, this ego, whose natural tendency is to cling and clutch, we have to let that go. We have to look at the serpent and realize, what exactly am I embracing? So the serpent is not just a symbol of God, it's also a mirror of us. And giving us a realization, what exactly am I trying to protect? What exactly is my ego trying to protect? When I see this serpent, it just reminded me of my own dilemma. But at the same time, it reminded me of hope, because the self that is buried in my own dilemma is also the place that Christ reached out in his humanness so that he could provide companionship with us, so that we could travel, we could tread through this valley of the shadow of death without fear. Brothers and sisters, I just want to let you know that God is there in our chaos. Let us embrace the process of going through this chaos. Sometimes our mental health is giving up because our work is how to fight the chaos instead of how to embrace the chaos and emptiness to fully experience a new beginning. If I be lifted up, Jesus says, meaning if I would be crucified on the cross, I will draw all men to me. And the men that will be drawn to Jesus Christ are the men and women who are willing to embrace and go through this chaos and emptiness process before they would experience the new beginning and the new life that Christ has promised us. God bless us, brothers and sisters. May God continue to touch our heart. I'm looking forward in seeing you in our next series.